Round 9 marks the turn of the year and also the halfway point in the regular season. My name's Mark. Let's talk rugby. The first half of the season really has flown by. It's crazy to think we're already in round 9 and, starting into the new year and that second half of the season as well after, this round of games. And, there's going to be plenty of disruption as well in that second half. We've got European games coming up again in January. Then shortly after that, Six Nations is going to come along. Players are going to, a lot of players are going to be away in camp, and, teams will need to, some teams obviously during that period will be able to be more cohesive than others, and they're going to pick up points there. But it feels like most teams, if they want to, either like have any ambitions of making the playoffs or finishing higher up the league, they've got to start the year well and get a little bit of momentum going in there. So another, I think, crucial round of games, and especially, more derbies as well. So you got bragging rights for players and fans as well on top of that. And feels like a lot riding on this, weekend's games as well. So we're going to start with the couple of games that are on New Year's Day. So couple of Welsh derbies, starting with the Dragons versus Scarlets. This is a 3:00 kickoff at Rodney Parade. And, here we have two teams who had fairly, poor starts to the season. Dragons got a couple of draws, but no wins there. Both kind of window starts to the URC season. And then, Dragons going to Europe, they get the first win of the season, come back off the back of that, get their first win in the URC. And Scarlets, during the same kind of period, get a couple of wins in the URC as well. So both of them, compared to this very start of the season, in a bit of a purple patch for them. But both teams now coming off losses in Welsh derbies last week as well. So, there's that whole thing of, if you lose one game, but you bounce back and you win the next one, that feel-good factor still stays there and you keep the momentum going. But if you lose a second game after that, especially in a game like this, where, we're talking about 15th and 16th in the league, so it's, bottom of the table clash, then heads can drop within the squad as well, and you can start losing that confidence that you've worked so hard, to discover for, that little patch that you had with a couple of wins there. So there's a lot riding on this for both of these teams, I feel. If we look at last 7 games in the URC, so Dragons had that draw against the Sharks in the Storm, then hammered by Glasgow by 49 points. Closer game is against Cardiff, but still lose by 7 points. Then a draw against Ospreys, followed by a defeat to Leinster by 14 points. And I've said this a lot of times, but I think it still bears being said that, in that game, they were very competitive, and there certainly was a scenario there that could have happened where they may have gotten a draw or a win out of that game as well. It was very tight towards the end. Then they go into Europe, they get their win in Europe, and then they come back and they beat, a fairly abject Connacht by 20 points. But, Dragons still had to perform. They scored 48 points in that game. So fair play to them for that. That was a brilliant performance from them. Leave the Connacht's problems aside for the moment. The Dragons, again, hadn't won at all in the URC, and then they win by 20 points. So that's a really good result for them and a good performance too. But then last week, against Cardiff, tight game, but they lose that by 3 points. So again, there's just the whole thing of they still got a losing bonus point against Cardiff. They're at home now. So, looking really to bounce back and just get back another win and then see where they go from there. Really, Scarlets then, bottom of the table at the moment. they start with loss against Munster, then heavy loss against the Stormers, and after that, then lose against the Lions by 11 points, and then to the Sharks by 10 points. So they're showing a bit more about them. They go into Europe. Very tough fixtures in there, but it feels like they're building towards something at least. And then a bit of a shock where they beat Glasgow by 23 points, and that was their first win of the season. And what a fantastic win to have there as well, going into those European games. Then they come back from Europe and they beat Cardiff by 4 points as well. So, some nice momentum there. And you were thinking last week they could definitely turn Ospreys over as well, being at home, but they lose to Ospreys by 7 points. I think that was 19-26 in the end. So, again, I think they'll be a little bit disappointed on the back of that. But, both of these teams, they lost last week, but they were close games. They were 7 points or less in it. So, again, you're not going to just completely lose all the confidence that's been built up when it was a tight game. A bounce of ball here or there, and it could have been a different result. So they'll both sets of coaches will be drilling that into the players for this one. But they feel like this is a bit of a must win in terms of just given the fact that they're both there at the bottom of the table. Let's say Scarlets, if Scarlets lose and Dragons obviously beating them, and if some of the teams that are a bit closer to them pick up wins as well, they could be a little bit of drift, starting to drift at least at the bottom of the table. So they'll definitely want to do that. But Dragons, they'll want to prove that they're not going to be bottom dwellers this season as well. So, and this is a brilliant chance for them. They're 2 points ahead of the Scarlets. They get a win here, and they're going to make that at least 5 points. With a win, you would expect. I suppose Scarlets could get 2 bonus points out of it, but I feel like this game isn't going to be hugely high scoring. I think it's going to be 2 or 3 tries, per team. I could be completely wrong, but I just get that feeling about it. But I'm going to go for home win, so it's going to be a Dragons win for me in that one. Okay, so on then to the other Welsh derby happening on the same day, Ospreys versus Cardiff. This is a 5:30 kickoff, and this is at Dunraven Brewery Field. And yeah, you've got the one Welsh team, Cardiff, who are doing really well so far this season. Ospreys, after the win last week against Scarlets, are beginning to climb the table now. They're up to 12th place. Cardiff still in second at the minute, up there near the top. And, they've got to be, you'd say, got to be pretty happy with how their season has been going so far. But still, it's about, Cardiff actually in 3rd place. Just looking at it there. I'm just looking between the URC site and Superbrew, and Superbrew have them in 2nd, which is not right. Munster actually in 2nd. But still 3rd place, really good in the league. And again, but they know all those teams around them are really close. There's just, a point or two in it. And given how well all those teams have started the season, any loss, and they're going to start slipping down the table. They don't want that to happen. Ospreys, kind of similar as well, that they're starting to move away now from that kind of group at the bottom of the table, but one defeat and you get dragged back in again as well. And if we look at the form, so Ospreys last 7, so lost against the Stormers, then they get their first win of the season, beat Zebre by 24, then lose against Glasgow by 25, draw against the Dragons, then a loss against Edinburgh, tight game, then a loss against Munster by 16 points. That was 26-10, I think. And then they lose that game, win that game last week against Scarlets. So, it's been a while since they'd gotten a win in the URC, so it was a good time to get it. And especially, again, it was kind of similar to the way Dragons and Scarlets are this week, in that you had two teams down there near the bottom fighting out between each other, and Ospreys come out on top. Cardiff, by contrast, have had a really good start to the season so far. Like, they've won 5 of their last 7. Started to run with a loss against Munster by 3 points. Probably feel like they definitely could have won that. Then they beat Connacht by 6 points. They beat the Dragons by 7. Then Edinburgh by a single point. Then Zebre by 15. They lose against the Scarlets by 4 points. And then they beat the Dragons by 3 points. So you can see there a lot of close games in that. But, it's not like they're losing a lot of games by a tight margin, which was happening to them, last season, I think the season before as well. This year, like, they've been winning the tight games, and again, this feels like another tight game between these two. I think there might be bonus points in the offing, though, in this game in terms of tries. But, to pick one, just because Cardiff's form so far this year has been so good, I'm going to go for Cardiff to win that one. Okay, so those are the Thursday fixtures, the New Year's Day fixtures. Then move on to Friday. We have one of the Irish derbies there. So Ulster versus Munster, 7:45 kickoff, and this is at the Affidea Stadium. So the old, I guess before was Kingspan, right? I never get used to stadiums getting named after sponsors all the time, but I guess you have to get used to it at some point. Right, but Ulster Munster, this is kind of an interesting one because you've got like two teams who are very close in the league. We have, I'm just gonna check the URC table because I don't trust the Super Brew one. But Munster second in the table, Ulster fifth, but there's only 3 points between them. So if Ulster get a win, they will leapfrog Munster, and we don't know how far up the table that will send them. They'll obviously at least be in the top 4, but depends on really Cardiff and Glasgow's results, whether they can get up into, the top 2 or 3 as well. But that's, how tight it is between those two teams. And yeah, it feels like it this year as well that, both of these teams have been more competitive than they were last season. Leinster having a bit of a blip at the start of the season, or more than a blip at the start of the season as well, has kind of thrown that a bit more into focus too, that these are the two teams who, are right up there at the pointy end of the league at the minute. And that you between these two, you don't want to be the one that loses this one, because Leinster are playing with their game. They're playing at home against Connacht. We'll come on to that in a bit, but they might be thinking, well, if Leinster win that one, especially for Ulster, we're going to slip behind them. If Munster may stay ahead of them because there's 5 points in the table between them. So they just have to pick something up in this game to be able to stay ahead of them for then. But you don't really want to be kind of just clinging onto your place ahead of a rival, by losing a game. So Munster definitely will be going for a win here. And I think this is going to be a super competitive game between these two as well. And both teams have won 5 of the last 7 games. And they've also, in the last 4 games, they've lost 2 of those as well. So very similar, records coming in. Ulster beat the Dragons well first up. Well, of the 7, because there was a game before that. Then they beat the Bulls. They beat the Sharks. Lost against the Lions down in South Africa. Then back to winning ways against Benetton. they lose against Leinster by 4 points. Leinster produced a really good last 20 minutes to take the win away from them there. And then they beat Connacht then by 5 points last time out. Munster started their run, narrow win against Cardiff, then 1 point win against Edinburgh. They beat Leinster, still the best performance of the season for me, by 17 points. Narrow win against Connacht. Then lost against the Stormers, where it was like top of the table clash between those two. And then bounce back, beat Ospreys, but then they lose the return game against Leinster, at Thomond Park, by 5 points. And that was a close one there, but and Munster in that game, they definitely looked a better team, ball in hand, in terms of their threat and attack. But I felt like Leinster's forwards, got them on the front foot more, and also Leinster's set piece, I think, shaded. Certainly, the scrum was on top. Line out was a bit closer, but yeah, you give set piece to Leinster in that one. And then both defences I thought were really good in the game. But, Munster won't want to lose 2 in a row. But then you're looking at Ulster at home, tough prospect this season. I think it was last season, or Ulster on last season's form compared to Munster on this season form, then I think you probably back Munster to win that game. But because both teams are in good form, and Ulster will have that, edge, I think, being the home team in this one, I'm going to go for an Ulster win. Okay, so that was the Friday night game. Then we're into Saturday. So Saturday's game, return of the South African teams. We start out with Hollywoodbets Sharks versus Lions. It's a 1:30 kickoff. Now that time is Ireland and the UK. So if you're in South Africa, just make sure you look up the local time. But it's at the Hollywoodbets Kings Park. And, we have Sharks in 13th and the Lions in 8th place. So Lions just about clinging on to the final playoff place at the minute. They'd love to be within that top 8 at the halfway stage, because then they know if they can kind of mirror their first half of the season, the second half, they're going to make a playoff. And I think that would be a big step for the Lions to be able to do that. But, I think it starts in this game. Can they go to Sharks team who are hugely underperforming in the URC year after year? Other than last year, they actually made a playoff. But Lions, just because they have a chance to win the game, they still have to take that. You can't just go there, thinking that it's going to be given to you. So we look at the last 7 again between these. So the Sharks, their run, they lose to Glasgow by 16 points. Then that draw against the Dragons. Then they lose against Leinster. They lose against Ulster. They get a win against the Scarlets. Then they lose, heavily against Connacht, and then they bounce back with that win against the Bulls last time out for them, which was the 20th of December. And then the Lions, their run, they lose against Cardiff, Zebre, and Benetton. Then win against the Scarlets in South Africa, win against Ulster as well at home. Then they go to the Bulls and they win there as well. And then they lost against the Stormers in the last 2 rounds ago in round 7. So the Lions, all of their wins in this competition so far this year have come in South Africa. They're playing this in South Africa, so at least they've got a decent chance to win it. And we look at it as well. In the last 7, Sharks have won 2 and drawn 1, and the Lions have won 3 and lost 4. So it's 4 losses for both the teams in the last 7. And yeah, it's a tough one to call. I'm kind of edging towards the Lions though, because the Sharks kind of in this competition find it hard to put performances back to back. So I'm going to go for a Lions win in that one. Okay, now on to the next one, and it's the other South African derby. This is DHL Stormers versus Vodacom Bulls, and it is a 4 o'clock kickoff at the DHL Stadium. And you've got, top of the league, Stormers versus the Bulls down in 9th place. So, depending on, how these games go, potentially you could have the Sharks overtaking the Bulls, or you could have the Bulls overtaking the Lions, or the Lions moving further up the table, more securely into the top 8 there. And then the Stormers, depending, on whether if they lose this one, obviously there's chances for the teams behind them to overtake them. At least a couple, I think 3 of the teams behind them potentially could overtake them. But you would expect Stormers to get something out of the game at least, and then that'll make it more difficult for those chasing teams. But as well, Stormers, they've won 7 from 7 so far this year, and they won't be contemplating a loss at all in this game, I don't think, especially against a Bulls team who, last season and for pretty much every season up till now in the URC have been solidly in that top 4 for most of the season, and have been easily, I think, the most consistent team not to have lifted the URC trophy, since the URC has come into being. So this year, seeing them in 9th place is a bit weird, especially at this point of the season. And they really do need some kind of spark. If they could go to Stormers and get a win there, that would be a massive spark for them. But Stormers have just taken everything in their stride is the problem. But if we look at the form, to Stormers, the hockey Leinster first up by 35 points. They beat Ospreys by 16. Then they beat Scarlets by 34. Zebre by 16, I think. Then Benetton by 15. Munster by 6. And then the Lions by 7. So the last 2 games have been a bit closer for them in the URC. Still been wins, though. The Bulls had a pretty good start to the season. They beat Ospreys by 13, then Leinster by 8, and that was a bit of a comeback win. Then they lose to Ulster by 21, and they weren't great in that game. They only scored the 1 try. Then they lose to Connacht by a point, beat Connacht by a point, and then they have a string of defeats. 9 points to Glasgow, 10 points to Lions, and then 9 points to the Sharks. So, yeah, they've got to find something, but you kind of worry that they're going to play this game, potentially lose this game, and where they're going to go for the rest of the season, because they're very poor in the first half of the European games, and now second half they may be resting players as well, just trying to spark something. So yeah, it feels like for them, even though, I think everybody's expecting them to lose this one, but I think you're going to see a big effort from the Bulls in this one to try and get something. Because if they get a win in this one, I feel like they will start climbing that table and they will get themselves back up into, at the moment, you look at the top 6 and it's very competitive, but the Bulls are a team that absolutely close those gaps and start, ticking off those teams their way up the league as well. But yeah, they have to start getting wins soon. In this one, I'd like to see them doing it, but also I like the Stormers too, so it's kind of a difficult one. But in terms of just form, I've just got to go for the Stormers in this. Can't really have any sentiment for it, I think, because Stormers has just been so good. Nobody's been able to beat them this season. And yes, massive scalp for the Bulls. They could do it, but I think it's one of those ones where I'm happy to come back with hindsight and say, oh yeah, I had a feeling about them, but to admit that I went for the Stormers. So I'm going to go for the Stormers to win that one. Okay, On to the next one then, and we have Benetton versus Edinburgh. This is a 5:30 kickoff, and it is at the Stadio Monigo. So, you got Benetton there, 7th place in the league. Edinburgh down in 11th. There's 5 points between them in the table. So it's unlikely, at least, that Edinburgh are going to, leapfrog Benetton with a win. Obviously, it's possible if they got 5 match points to 0, but you would expect Benetton at least to be ahead in the table at the end of this one. And, you've got Edinburgh team who got close to Glasgow in the first of the Scottish Derby games, and then not so close last week. So, and then Benetton did the double over Zebre during that period, and we look at their form. So Benetton won 4 of the last 7. That included wins against Glasgow and then the Lions. Then they had a run of losses against Edinburgh by 43. So definitely be looking to put that right. The Storms by 15, and then Ulster by 34. And then those wins against Zebre by 6 points, and then 14. Edinburgh, by contrast, lost against Zebre and Munster. Close game. So then that big win against Benetton. Lose against Cardiff by a point. Then they beat Ospreys by 2 points. And then those losses, first by 12 points and then by 18 points against Glasgow. So, yeah, in this one, just thinking, like, Edinburgh just haven't been able to do it this season. And it would be kind of weird. It'd be very Edinburgh, honestly, for them to go over to the Stadio Monigo and put up a win against Benetton. But I think Benetton are going to keep their form going, and I'm going to go for a Benetton win in that one. Next, then, we have the other Irish derbies. That's Leinster versus Connacht, 5:30 kickoff as well. So on at the same time as Benetton Edinburgh. And this is at the Aviva Stadium. So, we have Leinster at the moment in 6th place, and Connacht are in 10th place. So Connacht, if they could get a win, probably gonna get up into the playoff places. You would imagine that one result is going to go their way. So they'll either be 8th or 9th probably if they can beat Leinster. Leinster, by contrast, 6th place. They'll be looking to keep the pressure up on the teams above them. They won't want any kind of gap to start opening up between those, so they know they've got to go on a run. And speaking of runs, Connacht on a run of 10 defeats in Interpros, which is what the derbies are called here in Ireland. And yeah, it's kind of difficult to see in this one because, like, Leinster have started to kind of, still not playing brilliantly, but started to win, grind out wins and something that they haven't seen them doing, especially with all those guys who, are in kind of the Irish squad and stuff, that those players haven't had to do this before. And now they're having to do it. And I think it's given them another string to their bow, but still that attack looks pretty poor. Connacht still suffering though from their inconsistency, both game to game and within games as well. We saw against Ulster, and as well, game against Munster, where they'll have a good patch in the game, and then the other team will have a good patch, and it'll kind of swing back and forth a little bit. And then Connacht find it very hard to keep it going for an 80, even a 70-minute performance. Where if you get a decent 70-minute performance, you can get kind of a bit of a lead, and then maybe the opposition might score a try or even a couple of tries in the last 10 minutes, but you built up a lead and it doesn't really matter. They're not able to do that at the minute, and you kind of, do you think Stuart Lancaster, he's got a lot of work ahead of him. They've made a great signing though, in Frawley from Leinster. So that's going to be a big help to them. But I feel like, Lancaster definitely needs more time to get the squad, kind of mold them in his own image and getting them playing the way that he likes and changing that mentality as well. But if we look at the form of the last 7, so Leinster lost against the Bulls, then they beat the Sharks, lost against Munster, where they were just absolutely, outclassed. Then they beat Zebre, Dragons, followed by Ulster, and then Munster. 2 tight Interpro wins, but they got the wins in them, and that's the big thing for them, I think. Connacht, by contrast, win against Benetton. Then loss against Cardiff, the Bulls, and then Munster. Again, tight games, but they lost them. Then they beat the Sharks. Then they lost against the Dragons, and then that loss against Ulster as well. So, they've had tight games, as I said, in the Interpros, both against Ulster last week and Munster earlier on in the season as well. So, they'll want to now try and break that cycle. It's tomorrow, so tomorrow's New Year's Day will be the 2-year anniversary of Connacht's last win in a URC Interpro, and that was against Munster. I think they beat them 20-9, something like that. So they'd love to stop that going much beyond 2 years, but honestly, it's hard to see that happening in this game, and I'm going to go for a Leinster win. Okay, on to then the final game of the round, and that is Glasgow Warriors versus Zebre Parma. 7:45 kickoff. It's at Scotstoun Stadium, and Glasgow feel like they've gotten the mojo back now, and they're really kind of gearing up into decent form, I think. And if we look at the table again, I have to go onto the URC site because I don't trust the other one. So Glasgow at the moment in 4th place, and then Zebre in 14th. And Zebre had a great start to the season, and now they're falling away a bit, and they're kind of getting down into the clutches of the Dragons and the Scarlets. And you would expect that by the end of this round, they're probably going to be below one of those 2 teams, and that's not the direction Zebre probably thought they were going to be going after such a fantastic start to the season. But we look at form of the last 7, so Glasgow lost against Benetton, then wins against the Dragons, Ospreys and the Bulls, then lost against the Scarlets. That was a massive blip for them, and a big kind of taking their eye off the ball really there for that one. Bounce back though, doubles over Edinburgh by 12 points and then 18 points. And then Zebre, by contrast, in their last 7, beat the Lions by 2 points. Then a string of 6 losses: Ospreys, Stormers, Leinster, Cardiff, Benetton, and then Benetton again. And, between the 2 games they lost against Benetton, 20-point aggregate is not, isn't terrible really for Zebre when you think where they've been. If you go back like 2 seasons ago, that would have been not too bad to lose 2 games against Benetton and the aggregate difference only be 20 points. I think they would have taken that given their form back then, but their form last year and this year, they want to make strides. They obviously want to be, getting one over on the rival at least now and again as well. But looking at this one, Glasgow just in really good form, and especially like Jamie Dobie has been absolutely excellent. Like, playing on the wing. He's not, I've said it before, he's not filling in on the wing. That guy is a serious operator at wing. Yes, his normal position is 9, but it doesn't make the team any worse that he's on the wing. I think you have the benefit of him being able to come in and, if Horn is maybe trapped at the bottom of a ruck or whatever, he can go in and he can play there. or you just leave him out on the wing. He's got pace. He's elusive, and he's been scoring tons of tries as well. So brilliant for them. And given just the general form of of Glasgow, I've got to go for a Glasgow win in that one. Okay, so that's the end of that one. We will obviously be covering the games over the next few days. I'll probably try at least do one per day, and then we'll have a wrap up after that. But the one thing I want to say before we finish is I want to wish everyone a happy new year, and whatever type of year 2025 was for you, whether it was like the best year of your life so far or was an absolutely crappy year, I just hope that 2026 is better and it treats you well. I love having you guys watching my stuff, commenting. Even if you just watch, it's fine. But yeah, I just wish everyone to have the best year of your life in 2026.